You just want more, and then, it's like building a muscle. Happiness is like building a muscle, and there's all sorts of little muscles underneath of that and everything. But from the whole, every time you experience more happiness, and then you go through some bad things, you get through it, you're building that muscle. It's that resilience, and you just want more because you know how good it feels and you want to get back there at any cost. What do I have to do? I want to get back to that place.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. This is your bi-weekly now installment of your inner connection to your outer expression, where I, your host, Harrison, here with the beautiful guest who I'll get the pleasure of introducing here in a second, really set the intention of pulling back the layers, restricting health, alignment, and love. If you've landed on this episode today and you are a regular guest and tuner-innerer or listener-innerer, whatever you want to call it, thank you for coming back. If you're new to my voice and new to the powerful being that I'm going to be introducing, welcome. Remember that one of the ways you can spread this show's light, spread this show's love out there in the podcast world is by leaving your reviews either on Apple or Spotify. Share this episode out to the people you love most if you get a bit of value. And remember that if you're looking for some free self-love tools and elements to take your journey a bit deeper, other than this podcast, you'll see in the show notes, you can head over to my website, harrisonmar.com/learn more, to download some beautiful tools to get this journey a little bit deeper. With that foundation, I now want to introduce the powerful being I have the pleasure of having a chat with today. Sandee Sgarlata is a happiness coach. She is America's happiness coach. If you want to get really specific and insightful about it, she is a life coach, much like myself, and she's also a powerful podcast host. So you'll hear her crispy audio voice here in a second. What we're going to get into today is all things happiness. I want to break this down. I want to decode it with this beautiful being. We're going to talk about happiness in relation to PTSD and trauma, happiness, the myths around it. We're also going to bring in, as we always do here on the podcast, elements of spirituality and consciousness in relationship to happiness. But with all of that, Sandee, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thank you, Harrison. What a beautiful way to start your podcast.
You're welcome.
I love it.
I'm getting in the habit of asking my fellow podcasters this question. How does that feel? How is it? Any feedback for me, my friend, on that introduction?
Well, first of all, your voice is absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
And your accent.
Thank you.
And as an American, I love Australian accents or British accents. It's just like, love it. For those of you who are just listening, Harrison and I can see each other over Zoom. And what I loved was just watching you because your eyes are closed. And he's just talking with his eyes closed, and he's got these beautiful hand movements. And it was just so soothing. Like, you totally put me in like, I've had a busy day. It's, 4:30 my time, and you're in Australia. So we're on the other sides of the earth, and thank goodness for all this technology. But, it's like you have your busy day, and now my day is winding down, and just hearing your voice and what you were saying was just like, so relaxing. So thank you for that.
Sandee, I received the love. And what I'll say to that, and I think regular listeners of the show are probably going to know what I'm about to add here, but for you, what I've been unconsciously doing with that for a long time, and now I'm consciously stepping into it, is creating the space. And we haven't talked about this, Sandee, and we will talk about it today. I'm not sure how deep in your spiritual journey you are, but for me, I'm at the stage now where I've started stepping into some of my gifts. And I realize one of my gifts is the ability to channel the frequency of love in many ways. And what you saw me do is an aspect of that. So your intuition is already on fire.
And I receive your love because I could definitely feel it.
Yeah. Mission tick. We're in it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Sandee, what I want to do, where I start these chats usually, is I've had the pleasure of having a chat with you before, and I know your frequency already, but for people that are new to your voice, new to your love that you're about to share, I like setting a foundation of your history. And we don't need to spend too much time with it because I think the most important moment is this moment. But what I like to hit on is a pain teacher. And a pain teacher, as I'm sure you're aware of, these are things that have shaped us. And usually there's one or two moments that really define the work that we're doing now. So I'm wondering, Sandee, what comes up for you when I ask that question?
Well, there's two things that come up. The first one is I was born into kind of a very toxic, abusive family, in that my biological father would come home drunk and beat my mom and my siblings. And so I witnessed this from the time I was in the womb. And now science has proven that when you're in the womb, you're getting these downloads from your mother, right? And my biological father tragically died when I was 18 months old. So that's the one thing. Fortunately for us, my mother was 26 years old and a widow with 4 children. She met my stepfather, who raised me since the age of 3. So that was the silver lining in all of that, However, when I was 12 years old, my brother tragically died while serving in the U.S. Army. And so those two things have just shaped me and my journey. And it took a while, probably a good, into my early 30s to really see how those things happened for me.
Yes.
And not to me.
You read my mind, Sandee. You read my mind. Yeah. You're already in my head, Sandee. So thank you for sharing those things. And I can tell, and we're going to get into this around this idea of happiness. I don't know about you, but I know this is a challenge that I see within myself, and I see this within people that come to see me. It's that first sort of victim mindset that we need to shift out of around these justifiably so painful experiences. They are painful. We're not, both myself and it sounds like you, Sandee, we're not disowning that. They are painful. But I think what we need to shift is what you just beautifully highlighted is, I believe, and maybe I want to get your perspective on this, not only do we live in a universe where everything is happening for us, but it's happening for a bigger, larger reason. And when we shift out of that mindset, we're able to start seeing that. Does that resonate, Sandee?
Oh, it totally does. And the first thing that popped up is that when each individual reaches that level of consciousness, if you will, to get to that place where they realize that things are happening for them and not to them, the more people that we can get on this earth to be in that mindset, it's going to change the whole consciousness of the planet.
Yeah. You look at world events at the moment. I don't need to tell you, I don't need to tell people listening that there are a lot of I will say this nicely, a lot of situations that need that shift, right? Imagine how certain world leaders would make decisions if they were coming from that space that Sandee was just outlining. And it shows a lot of things, but I think the main thing it shows is that we aren't separated, right? We are a part of a collective, right? And if Sandee as the individual, or Harrison as the individual, shifts that mindset to become a more empowering one, that doesn't just impact us, right? It impacts the people that we're connected to.
Well, and we're proving it right here and now. You were on the other side of the world from me, and I could feel your love and I can feel your energy just by us talking to one another. Yeah. So, I always have to tell people, because when I coach and do some of my group classes and whatnot, I always start with the map of consciousness. and how we're energy fields. And I always throw in there, they're studying this at some of the top universities, not only in the United States, but worldwide, Harvard, Stanford, all of them, Yale, they're studying this. It's real.
Yeah. And hold that thought, Sandee. We'll come back to the map of consciousness because I definitely want to hit on that, because I think that work, we could do an episode just on that alone, but
exactly.
Let's pause it there. I want to take a step back. I think let's start here in regards to happiness. Let's begin with some myths, right? Because I think breaking down some happiness myths and then building back up from a more, powerful foundation, I think is a good way to begin. So what comes up, Sandee, when people ask you the question, what are some myths or what do people have wrong around happiness? What arises in you? Well,
first of all, many people think that happiness is a destination. Happiness is a journey. People think it's a destination, meaning I'll be happy when I get that perfect job. I'll be happy when I have more money. I'll be happy when I have the perfect partner. I'll be happy when fill in the blank. And that's one of the biggest myths, that people are striving for this thing. It's not a destination. It's the journey. It's the journey of life. That's the biggest myth, I think, that so many people are stuck in that. Another myth is that people tend to suppress a lot. Oh, well, I feel like I'm enlightened, or I feel like I'm above this. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And they shame themselves and they shove it down inside and let me just focus on everything I have to be grateful for and snap myself out of it. And while that works, I'm not making anybody wrong for doing that, but back up and let's feel those emotions. They go hand in hand. Science has proven the happiest people are those that experience the full range of emotions.
Yeah. Already so much. Yeah, I love it. There's already so much in there, Sandee. So let me hit on the journey piece. And I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday about this, and they were explaining to me, I feel bored right now. I feel like I've done all the things and I've got to the highs, got to the lows. And right now in this moment, I feel bored. And I was connecting to the idea of happiness because I knew we were about to have this chat, and I was thinking into it. I was like, is this a good place to be? Right? Is being bored in a space of boredom and sort of looking ahead, does this lead, are you truly happy in that moment? And I even think that, boredom or a disconnection from self in that state, we could also equate it to that, looking ahead to, okay, there's all the things that I'm doing, I'm not enough, or this isn't enough. And now I feel I need to reach for something. And I feel if we're in that state of reaching, that is also a state of looking for more, right? And not remembering that there is something inside of us that is already complete, already whole, already in its entirety. So if we're looking for something, that is a state of reaching. Does that resonate at all, my friend? Does anything come up around that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because whenever you're yearning for, I think it's the mindset that goes around it, because there's one thing to yearn for. It's one thing to yearn for something, and, we have goals and that's great. But I think that if it's not serving you, if it's something that's not going to be serving you, that's where you have to kind of take a look at it and see,
I think self-awareness. I'm not sure if are you a fan of Mr. Gabor Mate, my friend Sandee? Have you read any of his books? Or
no, I have not.
I would highly recommend you read the book When the Body Says No.
When the Body Says No.
Yes, it's a powerful resource. And you could skip that book and actually listen to an episode I did on it, but you could do both. But the thing I want to share here is he talks about the 7 A's of healing at the end. And these are healings that we can apply to all aspects: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And the first 2, I think, are the most significant. The first one is acceptance, right? We need to accept where we are in this moment, not our future, but we need to accept so we can change. And then the second is awareness, right? We need to bring awareness to what isn't, not just what we want, but what isn't working, right? So if we're not happy, if we are bored, if we are in a state that is not aligned to our goals, then change it, right? Make a shift. Does that resonate, Sandee? Does that
For sure,
make sense?
because it's funny because I've been on this self-improvement journey, self-awareness. I've been obsessed with it for over 30 years. Okay. And I never really thought about it.
Sandee, you want to know something funny? Just to add in there. It is my 30th birthday in 2 weeks, just so you know. Keep going.
Awesome. Welcome to the beginnings of middle age. So I have a mentor, and it was so funny because, pre-COVID, I was, a mentor needed to be somebody older than me or wiser or whatever. And this particular mentor is just turned 37, but he's so wise and this and that. I had him on my podcast, and I go, how did you get into self-improvement at such a young age? He was like working on Wall Street. He goes, because I realized that who I am today, I don't need to be that person tomorrow or the next day. And I was like, gosh, it took me a long time to figure. I was definitely not in my early 20s. In my early 20s, I was busy partying and, all that. But that's the thing.
Yeah. It's a big one, my friend. I want to take a step back to something you said. One of the other points, they're myths, and this is a big one. And happy you started with this idea of the toxic happiness, or I would equate it to spiritual bypassing. In my community, I would connect it to spiritual bypassing. And it's this idea that you alluded to of happiness means being in this state of happiness all the time and ignoring the other things that are moving through us. And my example that I give is spiritual bypassing, very similar, is I would define it as getting to those samadhi states, going into meditation, getting into the no mind, getting into the dropping into the heart space, all these beautiful things. But in that moment, ignoring maybe some of the wounds that want to be felt, maybe some of the childhood trauma that wants to be felt, maybe some of the, the mental abuse or the parental abuse. My question here for you, Sandee, why do you think this is a thing? Whether it's toxic happiness, whether it's the spiritual bypassing, how did this become a component of the happiness conversation?
Well, I think that when we reach a point, and I have to be honest, I kind of felt this way up until probably the past year, was that I don't think I really realized that it's okay. Like, I can be happy and also be angry, because for so long I would make myself wrong. No, you've worked through all this stuff. I shouldn't be feeling this way. You're above this. I mean, not in a cocky way, but you know what I mean? Like, what's going on in my mind? Like, no, no, let's just deep breaths. You just ignore it and blah, blah, blah. However, what I've learned, especially for me with all the tragedy and everything from my childhood, what I learned is that if we don't deal with that and at least rewrite the story of how it shows up for us today, things are going to show up in your life, and you're going to react in a certain way because of that memory. Yeah. And until we rewrite that or look at it in a different way and clear it from our consciousness, it's going to keep coming up. Yeah. It's not, and my mind is blown because I am 56 years old and I've been walking this path for 30 years, and I'm obsessed with self-improvement. And and it's interesting because I'm now working with a practitioner, and we're working on that exact thing. And I tell you what, knowing that I've rewritten some of these stories, I wake up every day and there's a huge weight off of my shoulders, and I see things with neutrality. Yeah. Things will happen, whereas I may have reacted in one way 2 months ago, that today I look at it and it's just neutral. It's neutral. There's no reaction. No trigger. Yeah.
So, Sandee, few things here. I am happy that you've got to this point. And this is just for people listening. This is not a Sandee thing, right? It's not a Harrison thing. This is something we're all capable of doing, right? Yeah. And I think that's the powerful point of this. And it shows that the world isn't changing, but we change. We change, right? We can have that one parent or that one partner that we've spent years and years and years reacting towards, having these things come up. And that one day that we make that release and feel the thing that needs to be felt, we'll come back into that same dynamic, that same relationship, and the whole thing has been flipped over its head. The partner might be the same, but that internal terrain has shifted. Sandee, I want to test a hypothesis with you. And this is a theory that I have. This is definitely not written down anywhere. This is pure Harrison-ness that I want to get your expertise on. Okay. And it's connected to this idea of happiness being all the expressions of what we are, or all the feelings, all the emotions. And I've shared this on the podcast before. So listeners, bear with me if you've heard this before, but I think expressing it with a new, powerful heart is always very interesting. So I tend to work holistically. So I'm trying to grab all the things and put them together all the time, right? From a mental perspective, an emotional, and most of all on this show, from a spiritual foundation. We know that through traditional Chinese medicine, that certain emotions are connected to certain organs, right? So I think the one that most people understand is the liver and anger, right? We know that liver has a big relationship with anger. We could say that anger is created in the liver, maybe, but we do know that from those spaces, then emotions communicate outwards, right? Based on what you were saying, then we can decide to listen to that communication to then be happy.
Right. My
hypothesis is, what is behind that? What put that emotion in the liver, right? How did the emotion get there? Was it created by the liver itself, or is there something else going on? My theory is, and maybe you've heard this, I truly believe that we are a spiritual being having a human experience. Mm-hmm. And part of what that spiritual being is a very energetic and emotional being, right? It's not just physical, it's made of energy. We are energy. This is my theory, and I want to see how this resonates for you. I actually believe when we are being emotional, when we are being sensitive, when we have these feelings moving through us and we acknowledge them, not only do we heal and does it allow us to express ourselves, it's actually us tapping into that spiritual nature. It's us tapping into that spiritual being that is communicating through the physical body. So not only does it heal, we're actually being more of what we are. How does this feel for you, my friend?
I want to make sure that I understand exactly what
did you get? What did you get from that?
So are you saying that by overcoming these challenges or dealing with these emotions, by doing so, it's your soul, your spiritual being, right? Because I do believe we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Yep. And by tapping into that, it offers physical healing.
Yeah. So not just physical healing, but also a deeper expression of that spiritual nature.
Right. Well, I'm not going to say this as eloquently as you just did. So my whole thing is that, have you ever heard of the Course in Miracles?
I have. Yeah.
So I studied that for a very long time, and it made a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
And I've always believed, because it made sense, and I'm the type of person, let me just preface this, that no matter what religion you practice, no matter what you identify with, for me, all that matters is that you have something in your heart that makes sense to you, right? Because at the end of the day, we really don't know, right? There's no proof of anything. We don't know. So it's just important that it makes sense to you. So this is what makes sense to me from the years that I studied the Course in Miracles, is that, started out separation, we wanted to be separate from God. We wanted to know what it was like to experience being a human. So everything that's being thrown at us as we work through it, we get a little bit closer. And that is our purpose, is to become one again with Creator, God, whatever you want to call it, the universe, to get back to that. So all of these things are happening for you because you're elevating your spirituality. I mean, so that's what makes sense to me. And my joke is that I've earned my wings and I'm done with this.
I love it.
This could be my, who knows how many times I'll be coming back, but I like to think like that makes sense to me. And it helps me get through everything that's going on out there, that like, I'm done after this. I'm getting my wings.
Yeah.
Probably not. I'm sure I've got a lot more stuff to be thrown in my life, but it's all for the greater good. And you just, we can reach heaven on earth. We can experience that by just dealing with all of this and living in the moment and getting uncomfortable, or getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. With the feels, with all the feels. So thank you, Sandee, for leaning into that. And I'm happy that was evoked in you from what I said. And I could not agree more with what you just outlined. What you just outlined is, in my opinion, the actual ascension process, right? The things that we move through to get back to the oneness, right? We are all, I have different words, but it's the same thing. We are soul expressions of a group of things that eventually stacks back to a one thing. And those soul expressions are moving through certain experiences to come back. I like to explain it as it's God breathing out and then breathing in, right? So God, or oneness, source, breathes out and makes all the beautiful, unique expressions, and then breathes back in with all of the experiences that those expressions have been through. And those experiences, which is what we're talking about now in relation to happiness, is moving through all of the things, right? Is not suppressing or repressing anything.
Not at all. Not at all. You have to feel everything that you're experiencing throughout your day. You have to feel it and acknowledge it. Put your arm around it. Fear. Oh yeah, there's fear again. Let me just put my arm around you because you're going to be here.
Yeah.
And you can come along with me.
So, Sandee, I didn't expect to go so deep so quickly with you, but it doesn't surprise me, my friend, based off your energy. I want to come back up just a little bit. We'll go back down. Don't worry. I want to talk about another element here, and this actually connects to the aspects, the fear, the pain, and it's this relationship of happiness and PTSD and trauma. So let's pull on this thread. What in the work that you do around happiness, what do you think is the link here between happiness itself and let's just start with PTSD?
Well, as I was out to dinner, 15 years ago. There's this little girl sitting next to me and she says, I don't even know what we were talking about. She looks at me and she just wise beyond her years. She looks at me and she goes, you have to get through the bad stuff to get to the good stuff. And I think that anybody who's experienced, not anybody, let's just say a lot of people, because there's definitely many people that will wallow in. Yeah, there is. There's a full spectrum of, who's going to go through the pain. But when you go through the pain and you do the work and you want to, get back to that place of happiness and peace that you felt at one point, when you experience that, you just want more, and then, it's like building a muscle. Happiness is like building a muscle, and there's all sorts of little muscles underneath of that and everything. But from the whole, every time you experience more happiness and then you go through some bad things, you get through it, you're building that muscle. It's that resilience, and you just want more because you know how good it feels and you want to get back there at any cost. What do I have to do? I want to get back to that place. So yeah, there's definitely a correlation.
So if someone's listening, my friend, and maybe they've been through some experiences. Maybe they have PTSD. And, I always put the disclaimer, this is definitely not medical advice. This is just me and Sandee talking and sharing our views and perspectives. But if I am a listener and I have had this experience, what are some steps I can take, right? In transmuting, as we've already discussed today, this beautiful pain teacher into something that flexes that happiness muscle. Where do we begin, in your opinion?
I believe at the end of the day, choosing happiness is all about shifting your perspective and your perceptions of things. Okay. And we could talk for hours about that topic right there. So I think PTSD is no different. Now, I'm not a doctor at all. I went through probably 15 years of therapy myself. Okay. So that's, if you have PTSD and you've never had therapy, you got to talk to a professional first and foremost. Okay. Once you have a grip on what's really happening, because you have to understand that psychology is dealing with your brain, and they're going to be able to help you understand how your brain is functioning. What Harris and I do as a coach is we get you to the next level after that. So I would say focusing, because this is what I had to do. So this is just my personal experience. So I was in the therapy. While I was in therapy, I was also training to be a life coach, and, kind of both were going on simultaneously. It really comes down to learning how to shift your perspective. And you don't want to start with the big things. Start with little stuff, little things. And when it comes to shifting your perspective. And once you start seeing how, there's another way to look at this. That person that just cut me off in traffic. This is my favorite example. That person that just cut me off in traffic. What do 99% of the people will be like, right? You get upset. I certainly do, because it's scary, right? You're afraid. There's fear there. And, and it's taken me many, many years. I'm totally transparent here. I used to be that person 20 years ago that would hop out of the car and walk up to the person and be like, what are you doing? Come on.
I'm imagining it. I'm trying to imagine it in my head.
So instead of just getting angry at the person, feel those emotions, take some deep breaths, calm yourself down. And then you want to make up a new story about it. And this is the easiest way to shift your perspective. So do you know that they deliberately try to hit you? Of course not. Most people will not deliberately. There's some jerks out there that may, do crazy things, but you can make up a new story around it. So instead of saying, they deliberately hit me and then you're miserable the rest of the day, because that stuff can carry with you all day long, that fiery emotion. Instead, well, maybe they just got a phone call and their child was in an accident and they're racing to get to the hospital. Yeah. Maybe they don't feel good and they need to get to the restroom, or most likely they just didn't see you and it's okay. So, start with little things like that, and then you can work towards the big stuff in your life that you really need to change that story, that dialogue around what happened.
It's funny that you frame this as a little thing, Sandee. I actually think I'm going to give you props here. And I think this is a gigantic thing. And I think people have probably heard me speak about this on the show before. What Sandee is saying here is something that I've also acknowledged and seen both in my journey and people I get to work with. When it comes to trauma, PTSD, it's often not the actual event that is causing the resistance, causing the triggers, causing the tension. It is the story we've told ourselves around the event. Another example that adds on to Sandee's beautiful one is, I do a lot of work with the inner child. And when you look at inner child work and child abuse and child trauma, the example that I give is, if you were abandoned as a child, right? If you were left somewhere, if you were rejected, ask yourself, was it the actual parent making that choice and leaving you in that space? Or was it then the stories that you created of, I'm not lovable, I don't deserve to have a family, I deserve to be alone, all these things that then continued after that.
That's right.
And this goes back to the emotional piece too, Sandee, and maybe I'd love to get your thoughts on this. those stories are also holding a lot of the emotions that we need to feel, right? So I'm wondering if you've noticed this, Sandee, in the work that you do. Once we shift those stories, I've noticed it unlocks a deeper expression of emotion that needs to be felt, right? So for example, when I shift from being unworthy, I deserve to be alone, to I'm boundlessly worthy, I deserve all the abundance, all the things in the world, then that unlocks maybe some repressed sadness, that unlocks maybe some repressed guilt, maybe some repressed shame that just wants to flow. What's your thoughts on that?
So yeah, I definitely think that it can, for sure. I mean, every single person is going to be different, and what's going to come up can be different. I notice for me when I'm really diving in, and like I've been doing recently, there's been little things that come up, but what I've noticed is like some of the things come up that surprised me that I didn't even realize were there still. And you're like, oh, where'd that come from? Like, okay.
It's the onion, the healing onion layer.
Right.
You pull a layer back and there's something there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I think this now, Sandee, leads us into what I wanted to hit on. You brought it up at the start, and now I think this is a beautiful space to dive a bit deeper into it. And it's the Map of Consciousness by David Hawkins. And I highly recommend people start with Power versus Force. That's where he first talks about the map. It's a book. I'm actually more of a fan of his, I think it was the next one after that. I don't know where in the order it was, but The Power of Letting Go. I think Letting Go is a powerful another resource by him. But let's maybe explain this first. What is the map of consciousness in your experience, your opinion, Sandee, and then we'll break this down and how this connects to happiness.
Yeah. So what he did, and I actually, when you were talking before, real quickly, I have some monitors up here, which are actually my lights. So I went ahead and I was like, oh, let me pull it out because it's easier to talk about it because I am not an expert in this topic at all. So I'm going to give you a very high level version, which is probably not a bad idea. So basically what David Hawkins did was he took all of the emotions that we experience and he's got them in this whole chart. And they break down into God view, life view, level, scale, emotion, process at the top. So they have those columns. And then there's all these different, you can Google it, map of consciousness. So basically the bottom half is all of the lower level emotions. You've got, like at the very bottom, you've got despising, miserable, shame, humiliation, elimination, and then it goes up from the shame column. And I like, these are the levels that I think people mostly can relate to: shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger. So, and then what he did was he assigned a number to each one, starting at 20, and it goes all the way up to enlightenment, which is like 700 to 1,000. And that's basically just to kind of rate where that word falls. And at 20 to 1,000 is your energy level, your consciousness, your frequency. Yeah. Like, frequency wasn't popping in there. Yes. Frequency. Thank you.
Got you.
But what I love about this and why I think it's important and why I do a very brief overview when I'm working with any of my clients in the groups is that you don't need to dive into this and learn all about it and this and that. Yeah. Just be aware of it because that is how you show up in the world.
Yeah.
And I always like to use the example of when somebody walks in the room and they're really angry, you can see it on their face.
Yeah.
You can always tell when somebody's angry.
Yep.
But the thing is what most people don't realize is that you're feeling that anger. Okay. Same is true if somebody walks in and they're so happy and they're, it's contagious and you want to be around that person and you see that they're happy. But the thing is you're feeling that energy, just as I was feeling Harrison's love when he was starting the podcast. I can feel it. So that's why when you're having these thoughts of shame, guilt, all of those things, you want to, feel it, acknowledge it, it's there, and then make that shift to us. Because what you're doing is then you're raising your own consciousness, your own frequency to that higher level. And that's where that's how you want to show up in the world. You're going to experience all of this because it's in our DNA. to feel shame, to feel guilt. It's a fight or flight. It's in our DNA. It's not going to stop, folks. Trust me. I was very ignorant to this because of the work that I've done. And I finally surrendered and accepted, like, you know what, this is just going to keep on happening. I got to keep doing the work. And I also want to note that this enlightenment level, which is 700 to 1,000, there's only been very few people that they know of that have probably operated in that state of being. And that's like Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Jesus, any other huge spiritual person that ascended masters. There's not a lot. Yeah. This is a work in progress. It's just, where we try to get to that point. Because I'm telling you, when you get there, it feels so good. It's just worth all the effort and the pain that you experience. It's worth it to get to the other side for sure.
You did beautifully, Sandee. That was a masterful breakdown, my friend. And so what I'll add to this is how I see this. And I'm happy that you distinguished between, so there is an obvious hierarchy here between the numbers, but I want people, and you said this, don't see that hierarchy is as good versus bad. I would see this hierarchy as more of a priority. So meaning that, let's use the guilt and the shame because they're the lowest, and I would use the word heaviness.
Yes.
When that is moving through you, that is more of a priority to feel it, to express it, to let it flow up and out. Because if you're holding on to that guilt and shame, and I'm going to, again, reference here both the inner child and both, I do a lot of work with the chakra system. These don't just have an emotional state of being. We are holistic beings. So if you are repressing a feeling, an emotion, a frequency of guilt or shame, and it has that heavy resonance, then there is also a corresponding physiological reaction, right? Yes. I would encourage people to go back and listen to the episodes I did on chakra healing and inner child healing. I'm going to give an example here. I've noticed that guilt and shame likes to hold itself around that sexual, sensual, womb, creative center, both in the female body and in the male body.
Yes.
So a couple of dots here. If you have experienced childhood trauma, and let's say it's sexual, let's say it's physical, let's say it's verbal, it could be any of them, and you created a story around it that also created a repressed emotion of guilt or shame, I would ask you, are you also having physiological challenges in that sacral womb center, right? Do you suffer from SIBO and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? Do you suffer infertility challenges? Do you have PCOS? Do you have sexual dysfunction? I'm not saying that these are the only components that lead to these challenges. What I am saying is that they need to be part of the conversation. And it sounds like, Sandee, the work that you do around happiness really brings this in. Does this resonate at all?
Oh, 100%. And now, I don't know if you noticed, I've been sitting here smiling.
Well, you've been smiling the whole time, my friend.
I know, but it was just like, it was just interesting because I had experienced a lot of infertility issues. And right around the time when I had literally had finished up my therapy, I was done with it. At the same time, because being a competitive figure skater, I had lower back issues, and my chiropractor said, I can't help you anymore. You need deep muscle, deep tissue massages. Within months of these massages and what she was doing, because I had done a lot of the emotional work on it, but physically she was doing a lot of deep tissue massage around the, I'm going to forget the name of the muscle. Most massage therapists will not touch this.
Psoas?
The psoas. Thank you. Thank you. The psoas muscle. Most massage therapists will not come near that because it's so close to your private parts, right? So most massage therapists will not do that. Every session she would work on that psoas muscle. It's very painful, but there was so much was released. I was told I would never have children without doing like IVF. 8 months after sessions with her, I was miraculously pregnant with my son.
Yep.
And he's
So beautiful.
He'll be 22 in September. I had a total of 5 pregnancies and my one boy. So there's a lot of truth to that. And so it's the physical part, that tension that needed to be released. But it was also the emotional components, because I did have some childhood abuse as well.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say what kind, but there was multiple childhood abuse in my past. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, Sandee, thank you for sharing that. And it's one thing for me to intellectually sort of break it all down. It's a whole other thing to have a beautiful, powerful example of it. Thank you for sharing that. And
you're welcome.
It's one of the reasons I love this show.
I'm pouring water into my cup so you don't have to see me drink out of my massive water bottle here.
Love it. What I wanted just to add to that, Sandee, have you read the book The Body Keeps Score by Mr. Bessel van der Kolk?
I have read hundreds and hundreds of books, but there's so many out there. I mean,
so this one, what
is it called?
The Body Keeps Score by Mr. Bessel van der Kolk. So it hits, otherwise, the reason I suggest it is exactly talks about what you just highlighted in your journey, right? And what we've been saying here between this happiness and emotional connection between the physiological expression of our body, right? There's, Sandee highlighted it and I highlighted it, but I just want to hit this home. There's no disconnect here. And a happiness and emotional conversation is a physical conversation too, right? Just so people really get this point. Sandee, I want to, it's almost already been an hour. This has gone super quick.
I noticed that a couple of minutes ago and I don't have my reading glasses on. I'm like, does that say 5:15? I'm like, what? Like, oh my gosh.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Sandee. It's, you're a beautiful being. And my heart told me that this would be a wonderful chat, but we've been showing the example of it. So I want to hit on a few more things here before we have to run. And I want to sort of bring all this together now. So we've talked a lot about, the mental challenges, the trauma challenges, the physical challenges. We've brought in the spiritual lens. If someone is looking to get started, right, and they realize they fit into one of the boxes that we've outlined here today, when they come and see you, right, and you've talked about this a little bit already, it's, changing the mindset, changing the perspectives. Mm-hmm. Where do we go from there, right? What are some of the other steps we can take, right? So maybe that mindset shift is the first step. Where do we go from there? So when people come to see you, what does that look like?
So when I talk about mindset shifts, there's a lot of little things that go into it. It's not, and in my book, I actually have a workbook in the back of it that has exercises to walk them through it. And I highly recommend that you do it every day for 30 days because you want to create a habit out of this. So, feel the feelings. We talked about that. You've got to feel those feelings. Once you have those, you're like, okay, I want to make a shift here. Forgiveness is extremely important and relevant in every single situation. You have to forgive the other person if there's another person involved, or forgive yourself. It's highly, highly critical, because if you have any sort of bitterness towards another person, you can't be happy. You may think you're happy, but if you're holding on to bitterness and grudges, you're not happy. Happiness and bitterness cannot exist at the same time. So the forgiveness is a huge, huge component.
Happy that you added this in. This was on my talking points, but I overlooked it and it needed to be talked about. It needed to be talked about, this forgiveness.
When I talk about that, it's just part of my deal.
Yeah.
So you've got the forgiveness. Next is, at some point you have to reach a point of acceptance and accept. And you mentioned that earlier. And it's not just accepting, but I believe that with acceptance, you also have trust. You have to fully trust that things are going to work out exactly as they're supposed to, without expectations. And that's the thing. So often we trust, but there's always little strings attached. If there's any sort of strings attached, you are not trusting it. So to trust is to fully give your will over with no expectations whatsoever. At some point thereafter, I believe, is when gratitude comes in. Because I mentioned earlier, you can't just gratitude it away, which you can do. I mean, you can be feeling angry and start focusing on gratitude, and you're gonna elevate. You're gonna get yourself out of it. You have to deal with that first. Then forgive, accept, trust. And I was reintroduced. I went to Hawaii in March, end of March. And I was reintroduced to this ancient Hawaiian healing practice that I had first learned about in 2006. Yes. Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono prayer. That says it all right there.
Yeah.
I love you. You're telling Spirit Creator, I love you. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. And thank you. The thank you is the very last part, because that's when you're expressing the gratitude. Yeah.
I feel like we could do another episode, my friend, just on all those steps that you just talked about there. But it's wonderful. It's practical, it's mystical, it's loving, and it really connects us into. So a couple of things bubbled up for me as you were sharing. First of all, not only does the gratitude at the end really, tightly tie a bow on all of it, we need to remember that gratitude is also an attractor energy, right? We've been talking about today, we are frequency, we are energy, we are, many of these energetic expressions. And when we get into an attitude of gratitude, we attract more of the same, right? So as you've beautifully highlighted today, this is not a linear sort of destinational thing. When you follow those steps, you're probably going to have to do them again and again and again.
It's rinse and repeat, and repeat.
But when you end those steps with the gratitude, you're attracting more of the people, more of the places, more of the circumstances that are conducive for you to continue doing these steps, right? You're shifting out of, again, the victim into this expansive open being that is on this healing journey for life, right? And now becomes a day-to-day lifestyle rather than just one thing that you did with that coach in Hawaii last summer, right? Now it's part of you, right? Sandee, I think this happiness conversation went to so many different realms that I didn't expect, but I'm happy that you brought all this together, and you're such a beautiful light in this world. And I'm happy that we met and got to spend some time together. If people want to connect to you and want to start tuning into more of what you do in this world, I know you have a book that you referenced. I know you are a coach, and you also have your own podcast. So I would love for you to now express these elements that you want to share with my listeners and show them some other ways they can go deeper with you.
Absolutely. So you can connect with me on Instagram or Facebook at Coach Sandee Sgarlata. On Instagram, on my link tree, and I think in my Facebook page, my link tree is in there too. You can get a free digital copy of my book.
What's the name of the book?
So my book is called Happiness Solved: Climbing 100 Steps. For those that are watching, there's the cover. It's also behind me. You can also get that on Amazon in both the hardcover, softcover, audio, and Kindle version. Let's see. So that's my book. My third book is coming out. I was hoping to get the copy of the cover today. I'm a co-author with 19 other authors in the Change series by Jim Britt and Jim Lutz. Jim Britt was actually Tony Robbins' coach for the first 5 years of his career. And the version that I will have on my website, I will be on the cover with Les Brown, which is kind of cool.
Congratulations.
So I have a chapter in that called Happiness Solved: Change Your Perspective, Change Your Life. So I have that chapter there. My podcast is Happiness Solved. Is there a theme here or what, right?
I'm noticing a theme.
Noticing a theme. And I just noticed this last week that it was number 11 out of the top 80 happiness podcasts. It's now number 10. So I am in the top 10 of the top 80 happiness podcasts.
Beautiful. Speaking of attraction, right? And attracting more of what you deserve.
Yeah. And, if you reach out to me, Sandee at sandeesgarlata.com, just go to sandeesgarlata.com. Up on the upper right-hand corner, there's a button to click to schedule a free call with me. So Absolutely.
As always, beautiful listeners, if you go to your podcast player, you click on details of this episode, you'll see all those links and all those connections to Sandee if you want to reach out to her, read her book, do her coaching, or listen to her beautiful podcast. Sandee, where I end this episode is with one very interesting question. And we spoke about the map of consciousness before, and we talked about these frequencies of emotions. And one of the highest emotions and frequencies we can connect into is the one of love. And this podcast sets the intention and the foundation of really changing the conversation around what love actually is. I believe love is not just one of those high frequency emotions, but it is also a very mystical foundation of what we actually are. So I'm wondering, Sandee, how do you define that love word personally?
The love, how do I define love? Well, love is different for everybody, and we all experience different ways. The love that I have for my son is like, there's no other love like it. And I don't even want to say I don't believe that there's anything as unconditional, because if you say it's unconditional, then there's a conditions applied to it. Right? I heard somebody say that. I was like, oh, my lights just went off. I heard somebody say that, and I'm like, that makes so much sense, right? So the love I have for my son is one that it's both scary and it's the most amazing feeling I've ever felt in my life, right? The love I have for my husband, he's my second husband, like, he's the love of my life. I never thought in a million years I would ever experience that. Now, I take care of my mother, who's 81 years old, and I'm so grateful that I am able to take care of her and that I have my mother to take care of, right? The love is so different for everything. And I have to say, you kind of stumped me here, because nobody's really asked me to define love. It's just something that when I'm thinking about my son or my husband or my mother, it's just my heart center is so warm and fuzzy. And it's almost like, feels like this violent, I always see, when I close my eyes, I see this violent light just swirling around my entire body and like engulfing my entire body. Mm-hmm. So that's because I'm a very visual person and I see things. And that's how I write. Like I write what I see, kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's just kind of like this just amazing feeling of just violet energy and just, yeah.
I love it, Sandee. And you said it yourself, everyone has their own beautifully unique expression of what that love is for them. And that's why I ask the question, because it always comes up so uniquely. And I would encourage you, Sandee, just to give you a tiny bit of coaching here. Tune into that violet visualization that you were just talking about. I actually feel, as you were explaining that, I'm a visual person too. And something was deeply moving in me when you were explaining that image. So I think for you, as the beautiful individual that you are, I think there's even more of a depth you could go into with that violet energy, because like I said, love isn't just in a relationship element. It is something deep inside of us that has many different forms. So yeah. I'm excited in our next chat, Sandee, how that expression has expanded within you. Yeah. Sandee, I love you very much. Thank you for spending time with me today. You're welcome. You're welcome. Beautiful souls out there in the listening world. Thank you for giving us your ears. Thank you for giving us your heart and your energy. Please tune in next time here on the Cosmic Love Antenna with your weekly episodic episode. But until then, we wish you a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And we love you unconditionally. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, MEAGHER.